going on, College Hoops heads? This is, I want to say another episode, but another live stream on the Center Hub's YouTube and Twitter page. Twitter, X, you guys call the shots. We are here to talk college basketball. My name is Steven Bagell. I am joined by Conrad Pascual and Julian Mendelsohn, both of the Center Hub, of course. Both part of the College Basketball Season Preview magazine. If you're watching this, I'm sure you're familiar with the product we are pre-selling. If you're watching on YouTube, it is in the bio, the link to purchase. It is $12 pre-order. If you're watching on Twitter, it is our pinned tweet on at the @thecenterhub_BB Twitter page. $12, highly worth the investment. I am writing the Big East, the SoCon, and Conference USA. So I will be talking Big East today, obviously with my ties to the conference after covering the tournament last year and Villanova games and all that. Julian is he's talking Patriot today, but he's doing Patriot, Southland, and
the SWAC.
The SWAC.
SWAC.
Yes. Meanwhile, Conrad's here to host with us today, but Conrad is doing the SEC, Sun Belt, and the Big West.
That's right.
All three of us obviously have our hands full, writing 3 conferences each. But with that said, yeah, we are talking Big East and Patriot League today. Julian, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Well, we gotta flip the focus when we get to Conrad, because you're no longer in the host seat, buddy. You're sitting in the interviewee seat. But I'm good. It's actually great timing to be talking Patriot League. I had a great conversation with Coach Matt Langle today about his team. We'll get to that when we get to that. But I'm feeling good, man. College basketball season is very, very close, and I'm very excited.
It's very close. What day? It's October 21st is Big East Media Day, for perspective, at MSG. So I know we're talking Big East, magazine's coming out in a couple weeks.
We're about a couple months away from the season. We're a little over a month away from the season starting as well, which is exciting.
Yeah. I know. You're already seeing some of these exhibition games and everything, scrimmages. It's it's really real. It's coming together.
So, okay. Let me start, Conrad. I know you're hosting. I've hosted every single one of these. We are live Tuesday and Thursday every week leading up to college basketball season, doing 2 conferences every episode.
He can't help himself, guys.
I can't. I cannot.
But TCH head honcho. So, yeah.
let me start with this, and then, Conrad, you could kind of take over from there.
You're interviewing yourself. This is awesome, dude.
You guys are just here to watch. Let me start with this. Last night we did a one and done pod. Of course, go subscribe, listen wherever you get your podcast, for the ACC with myself, John, and Andrew. Obviously, both of the Center Hub as well. And we went on back and forth between how many teams in the ACC are going to make March Madness with the super conferences in the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC. The ACC and the Big East seem to be the 2 teams that might be the odd men out in terms of getting more than 4 teams in. I think that's what the ACC, that's what the Big East did. Big East got 4 last year. Yeah. And ACC also got 4. So I just preface that to say, I don't know how many teams. Obviously, we know UConn and St. John's are at the top, but after that, I'm trying to figure out logistically as I'm writing this conference how many tournament teams are actually in the Big East. And I'm interested to get your guys' opinion on that from an outside perspective, from someone who, isn't writing the conference for the magazine and doesn't have, as much allegiance to the Big East, if that makes sense. So, Conrad, Julian, go ahead.
I can get back to that and then let Conrad host. So I'll be a second intermediary guest here. But, I think it's going to really depend on non-con this year. Last year we saw the SEC absolutely tear through the non-con play, and that's a big reason why they were able to get 14 teams in the tournament. Because even when you looked at teams like Oklahoma, you looked at teams like Vanderbilt, towards the bottom of the SEC in terms of the standings, you looked at their non-conference wins, and that was a big talking point. And I don't think the Big East, outside of St. John's, who really, tore it up in non-con play, Marquette had a pretty good non-con as well. most of the other Big East teams didn't really dominate non-conference play like we expected them to, and I think that's why we saw the dip. So, and you look at it here.
Just for perspective, I had them all saved, so we'll start with Villanova. We could quickly go through the other non-cons as well.
I mean, but the thing is like for Villanova, they have to win those Big Ten games. They just have to if they want to get more bids for the Big East. That's just how it's going to be. If you're the Big East or the ACC this year, in non-con games, it's kind of crazy to say, but you have to prioritize games against the Big Ten and the SEC because otherwise they're going to take all of the bids. And so that's kind of what I think the key is for these Big East teams. Because I think there is, realistically, with the way the Big East has been for a long time, there should be 5 to 6 teams going into the tournament. There should. It's been historically one of the best conferences in college basketball for a long time. Again, we look at St. John's. They have to win at least 2 of Alabama, Ole Miss, and UK. They have to get another bid for the conference.
Well, St. John's is a preseason, top 5 or 6 team in the country?
And exactly. If you want your conference to get more bids and, middle of the pack SEC teams are beating the best team in the conference, that's not a good look for the conference.
So let's go back. And obviously, St. John's has a players' era. These 2 games, Iowa State, Baylor. Then they have the 3rd players' era game. They're playing Kentucky, Ole Miss, Alabama. Incredibly hard schedule. I think Rick Pitino actually was quoted saying, we might as well join the SEC, given they're playing Ole Miss, Alabama, and Kentucky all in the same year. Let's go back to Villanova, though. Because Villanova, I think, is the bubbliest team in this conference from my perspective. They open the season against BYU. Then, they have a couple, I don't want to say softballs, but some lesser opponents they should take care of. Then Michigan, Pitt, Wisconsin. And that's at Michigan and at Wisconsin. They have to win. They have to beat Pitt at home, probably have to win at least one of Michigan and Wisconsin. And then BYU on the neutral. You have to win, 2 of those games at least? Go 2-2, I think?
I think 3.
Okay. So then let me just pull up very quickly, because I think this is prevalent to Julian's conversation of how essential it is for the Big East getting bids in terms of their non-con schedule. So this Michigan State game is an exhibition. Arizona is going to UConn. It looks like I can't tell if that's a neutral or not. Arizona is neutral. Illinois is at home at Kansas. Florida is at MSG. That's the game I'm hoping to be at, cover as credentialed media. Texas, UConn set themselves up well, but UConn typically does. That's why they're national brand. And then one more I'll put up is Marquette. This one's not as impressive. They have Indiana, Maryland, Dayton, and Oklahoma. Oh, and Wisconsin, I see. Let me turn off this banner for 1 second. Oh, and Purdue. Good thing I took that banner off at Purdue. So, yeah, even Marquette is scheduling a lot more difficult opponents compared to what they've done in seasons past. So, okay, Conrad, you want to host?
Yeah. Well, real quick, though, it's funny. As Julian was saying, it's the mark of how competitive or it's indicative of how competitive the Big East is. If you're saying that 5 teams making the tournament is a down year, which it historically is, that's how competitive it is going to be. I think the notable thing, though, from a lot of those teams that kind of missed out last year, they're scheduling some of those non-conference teams, those Big East or those Big Ten opponents later in the season. So by then, if you've stacked wins against the teams you're supposed to beat, and then you're going right around the time where the committee is kind of making their, however their selection process goes. Hey, recency bias is a real thing, So if you can knock off, like you said, Marquette, you get those wins against, say, like Purdue or something, probably counts. I won't say it counts as 2 wins, but,
It does.
It kind of does. It kind of does. So it'll be interesting because I'm with you. I think there's a case to be made, and you'll probably go into it. I think they should have 7 teams that are in the mix
They're not getting 7 teams.
They're not getting 17, but I think there is 7 that will have a legit case. But anyway, so having said that, so yeah, Big East, we know, like, as we said, like you just kind of went through a number of those team schedules. We know some of the more marquee names, the more recognizable teams, the teams that a lot of fans, even casual fans, would expect to hear those names towards the end of the season, right? Once tournament time comes. But in general, compared to last year, as you said, it was a down year last year. How is just the overall landscape of the Big East shaping up to be this year? More competitive, just as competitive, less competitive?
It almost has to be more. As I said, they got 4 bids last year. UConn and St. John's going to be 2 of the top 7 projected teams in the preseason. So, like, they have 2 legitimate national title contenders, which is more than what they've had the previous years. Last year, if you remember, UConn on the bid to 3-peat was an 8 seed and lost to Florida in the round of 32. Creighton will probably take a step back, but still be a preseason top 25 team. A lot of that depends on Owen Freeman's injury. He is not clear to play yet, and he may not be clear to play by the season opener. So a lot of that's going to dictate, how good Creighton is. I'm down on Marquette. I mean, I wrote it in my 100 storylines to know for college basketball season that Shaka Smart's tragic downfall is hubris, because all he does is just develop guys and stick to the guys he recruited as freshmen. They don't have a single transfer coming in. They might be the only team in the country that doesn't have a single transfer coming in. They lost Cam Jones. They lost David Joplin. They're just, I don't know. You need Chase Ross to step up. Ben Gold is the other returning starter along with Chase Ross. And they have Sean Jones was out for the year last year with the torn ACL. He's going to be the starting point guard. But you need guys like Royce Parham and Zayd Lowry to really step up. Shaka Smart's one of the best at developing in the country. So maybe they do. But I'm down on Marquette. Villanova is going to be better than they were last year, but Kevin will need some time to adjust. He took the job so late into the year. By the time Maryland was eliminated from the Sweet 16, he missed out on so many good chances he could have probably got. So Villanova will be okay. Providence is the team I'm highest on, though. Like, if you ask me, Conrad, which team, like, do people may not know about as a tournament contender that will be, I would say Providence. So overall, I do think that's 6 teams I talked about. I do think 4 to 5 of them get in out of those 6. Maybe Georgetown, but.
Whew. Okay.
You said 7, so those would be the 7. The 6 I said, and then Georgetown will be the 7th of teams with champion or March Madness tournament aspirations.
No Xavier?
Now with Gabriel Pizzata out. If Pizzata was healthy, then yes, he just got surgery on torn meniscus. I don't know if from what I've heard, I don't know if he's going to play this year, unfortunately.
Yikes. I think actually to a certain extent, Providence probably would be a surprise name, a surprise team relative to how they performed last year. What exactly about Providence, without going too much into detail? If you want the real detail, I encourage everyone to buy, the college preview, the college season preview magazine. You'll find the link, pinned in the Center Hub's X profile, whatever, X page. But specifically, what is it about Providence, actually, that kind of gives you reason to believe that they're kind of poised for a big bounce back here?
I really like Jason Edwards, for starters. He was Vanderbilt's, I believe, leading scorer. He averaged 17 a game last year at Vanderbilt, who was, again, the SEC was the best conference ever last year, getting 14 March Madness bids. Vanderbilt was in the thick of it. So we know he could compete at this type of level. Jalen Sellers, they basically took a flyer on. He was at UCF. Last year, only averaged 6 points a game, only played, I think, 3 or 4 games. He was UCF's leading scorer 2 years ago, averaging 17 a game. They have decent amount of playmakers with Corey Floyd Jr. and Daquan Davis, who's a sophomore from Florida State. Front court's good, too. I'm going to butcher this guy's name, so I apologize. Aswin Iowunutse.
Oh my God.
I said I was going to butcher it. He's a sophomore. Ryan Mell is a sophomore. Like, you anticipate both those guys from their freshman year after returning to take a sizable jump, like freshmen and sophomores typically do. They got Duncan Powell from Georgia Tech, who I think is a really good player. Averaged 12 and 5 for them. Shot 36% from three. Cole Hargrove, I saw multiple times at Drexel last year. So, like, they have so many bites at the apple in the front court with a stable backcourt. If this team struggles, I think Kim English is really going to be on the hot seat because there's some speculation already about how good of a coach he is, and whether he really deserves that job after Ed Cooley left. So I think this will be a big year to determine for Kim English and Providence.
So speaking of a big year, obviously, St. John's and UConn, we talked about them being the two big teams in the conference. What is a realistic expectation for them as far as well, first off, pick one. Who do you think wins the conference between the two of them, and which one do you think goes further in the tournament?
When writing for the magazine, I think the very last thing I'm going to put pen to paper on is who's going to be 1 and who's going to be 2 in the Big East. Like, I will get everything else done, and then right before I publish, I'm just going to UConn 1, St. John's 2, or St. John's. Like, that's a question I really don't know the answer to. For purposes of this right now, I'm leaning towards UConn. Continuity really does matter. UConn does have quite a bit of it, as opposed to St. John's, who has the number 1 transfer class incoming. Plus, I want to get the perspective from you two, two guys that aren't, writing the Big East football publication. Like, what do we think about St. John's situation with basically 3 power forwards and 2 shooting guards in the starting lineup? They're playing with no point guard. Like they said, Dylan Darling's coming off the bench. Ian Jackson's probably going to be the starting point guard. He hasn't played point guard since high school, which I know is only, 2 years ago. But I don't know if he's a point guard. Like, for a team with championship aspirations, their biggest issue last year and why they lost to Arkansas in the round of 32 as a 2 seed was because they had no shooting. They were historically good defensively, but the shooting was terrible. This year, they at least addressed that. You need Bryce Hopkins to be healthy, obviously. I don't know how much him and Dylan Mitchell will be able to play together. Zuby's a starting 5, but with no point. I mean, you have Isaiah Sellers, Ian Jackson. I think they need Jason Sanan. I really think Dylan Darling is going to have to step up and really be like that stabilizing playmaker for them. But I'm interested in your perspective of like St. John's basically going without a point guard going into this year.
I'll start. I think if anyone can figure it out, it's Rick Pitino. And I would not be surprised if once the season gets going, if Ian Jackson eventually gets shifted to shooting guard and is asked to be the guy to make shots. That would not shock me at all. I do think though that their front court is so big, so dominant on the glass, defensively sound. Like, this is probably one of the strongest front courts in the country when you look at it. And I think that that's what's really going to carry them. I know guard play at times was definitely an issue last year. Who was it? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
RJ Luis was an All-American for them.
Right, got benched in the tournament.
That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, but my point being, if no one's safe when Rick Pitino's coaching.
They had Kadari Richmond last year as the other backcourt guy.
Yeah, who I'm not the biggest advocate for, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I think if Pitino's going to shuffle it around, he's going to figure it out. I think honestly though, if we're talking about bids for the Big East, that if you're Providence or Villanova or one of these, 5th, 6th, 7th teams, you're not going to love to hear that because it means that they're going to be figuring out during the non-con. But I think they will, by the time conference play comes around, I think they will get it figured out. I'm not particularly concerned. I know most people would be. I know it's traditional to have a point guard, but this team plays such good defense that the playmaking will come from somewhere. Pitino's going to find someone to do it.
Let me jump in real quick on why like UConn more than I want Conrad to answer the same question. Again, just from an outsider perspective. UConn, you know what Alex Karaban's going to be. Salo Ball took a huge jump last year. He was one of the best catch and shoot guys in the country last year. From everything I've heard, Dan Hurley is expecting Silas Damari to beat Tristan Newton. In terms of Tristan Newton ended up being the most outstanding player on the Final Four. Taurus Reed is going to be the guy there. He only played 20 minutes a game last year and almost averaged a double-double. They have Braylon Mullins, Malachi Smith. You know how good he was at Dayton. Jalen Stewart. Like, this team goes deeper, and they have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 returners from last year's team, as opposed to St. John's, who has one, Zuby. So I'm going with UConn. I mean, both so well coached. I think they're 1A, 1B more than they are number 1 and number 2, if that makes sense. But Conrad, what's your opinion of St. John's and this Rick Pitino experiment without any point guards?
I mean, I'm probably going to lean towards UConn having the edge in the Big East, as you said, simply because of they have significantly more continuity. You know, I mean, again, we cover, the NBA draft. So we know, like, for example, like Alex Karaban, he's been on NBA draft radars for like the last couple cycles, and he elected to stay. But in doing so, I mean, like I think in terms of like, you want like quote unquote veteran experience. I mean, I think he's as, veteran savvy and battle tested as it gets. I think, I expect Dan Hurley to really lean on Karaban's leadership, but I think also because, or mainly because he's basically, played different roles right throughout his time at Connecticut. But as for St. John's, like what Julian was emphasizing in terms of like their, defensive upside and really like the versatility, I think I could definitely see them, like again, Sanan, Ian Jackson, as Julian said, right? They're going to get stops. They're going to be forcing turnovers. They got a bunch of defensive playmakers. So yes, they'll have a lot of transition scoring opportunities. But given their personnel, as Steven, you're saying like, well, what are they going to do without a true point guard? I think it's kind of mitigated by the fact that they're such, like they seem to be built to execute really well in the half court, So, even if they're not necessarily, just go like flying in transition, I think, again, whether you're playing through Zuby and then you make use of like Sanan and Ian Jackson's kind of like mid-range, shot creation, dribble penetration. I think there's a lot of opportunity where, again, they're going to win by controlling pace, which is what we've seen Pitino do, throughout his entire coaching career, right? Whether that's controlling pace with a traditional point guard, time of possession, or simply like, as Julian was saying, with these front court guys, their ability to just dominate the glass, right? Control time of possession simply by controlling, right, the battle of the boards. I could definitely see them doing that. Now, what is their upside? Like how far can you go with that kind of team? Almost like a grit and grind style. I'm not sure, but I know at least within the Big East, they're probably suited. That I think they're well suited. I have a question for both of you, but since we have the TCH big man guru, okay, which roster do you actually think has the best, if not the most dominant front court?
Call me crazy. I'm gonna say St. John's. I love Zuby.
I agree.
I love Zuby Ejiofor. I think straight up, but I think him and Dylan Mitchell combined on the boards is going to give just about every team in the country a fit. And I like that you talked about extra possessions and controlling the tempo, because I think that's going to be it's very Texas Tech and Texas A&M Buzz Williams, very Ole Miss Chris Beard, where, we're going to beat you up on the glass. And it doesn't really matter how well you shoot the ball, because we're going to get twice as many possessions as you are, because we have two guys who you cannot box out individually on a routine basis. right? And I think that's what makes their front court so devastating. And I think Terrace Reed on his own is fantastic as a center. But I think when it comes to if you're talking about like versatility and being able to do more outside of the paint, I think UConn is a little more suited to that. But if we're talking about like pure college front court stuff, I think that the front court that Pitino has going is a little bit stronger, more durable, and capable of on its own taking over a game, I think.
I also like the fact that Dylan Mitchell provides the athleticism between Zuby and Bryce Hopkins, where obviously Bryce Hopkins hasn't really played basketball in 2 years, not much of it at least, with his knees. So obviously he's not an athletic specimen anymore. So Dylan Mitchell's giving the athleticism in between those two guys that I think St. John's desperately needs.
Yeah, he's the defensive versatility, I think, on that front court. When I said UConn has more versatility, I meant more offensive versatility because we know what Dylan Mitchell is capable of on offense at this point, unfortunately.
Who do you think was the most impactful transfer
in the entire conference?
In the entire conference, like incoming transfer.
I suppose I want to say Owen Freeman, just because Creighton's going to miss so badly what they lost from Ryan Kalkbrenner rather, but just everything I'm hearing out of UConn is how good Silas Stamari is, how good he's going to be for them. So I think just based off what we know with Freeman's injury, with Bryce Hopkins' injury, I think I'm going to say Silas Stamari is, if you ask me who wins Newcomer of the Year, that's probably my answer in this conference.
Are there any, out of all the information that you've gotten when it comes to this stuff, outside of Providence, are there any teams that you think are going to surprise you, good or bad?
I think Xavier can. And Julian, I know you mentioned them a couple minutes ago. I realistically don't think they will. If Pizzata was playing, I think that's a completely different team because I think he's the best player on that team. He's a transfer from Evansville. But Trey Carroll from FAU is a sturdy, I think he's a 6'8", 6'9", 3-and-D wing. He's going to play the 4 for them. They just have so many bites at the apple in terms of just guys popping under Richard Pitino. All Right was freshman of the year in the Missouri Valley, which we know is a really good conference. He might start a point guard for them. Malik Messina Moore from Montana is a great combo guard who shot 41% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. There's just so much upside of potential on that roster with a good coach like Richard Pitino, who we saw develop Donovan Dent, who we saw develop JT Toppin. Those guys are both All-Americans this year, and Richard Pitino developed both of them. So it'd be silly just to count Xavier out, but they'll definitely the team I think that similar to what Washington State did a couple years in the Pac-12, where they just came out of nowhere. I think that would be Xavier this year. Could be, rather.
Nice. On the flip side, who was the most impactful transfer who left the conference?
Most impactful transfer. So not a graduation.
Yeah, not a graduation. I mean, congrats to them, though. Good luck with life. And stuff.
I mean, we know it's either Eric Dixon or Ryan Kalkbrenner if you're saying who graduated.
Yeah,
and congrats to them on an NBA, Kalkbrenner with an NBA career and everything.
I'd probably go with Ryan Conwell. I saw this dude in the Big East tournament against Marquette. I know I talked about this the other day. I think it was the Big East tournament record for most points in a game. That dude was unconscious, and he's going to be so good for Louisville. Ryan Conwell, I think, is the most underrated player in the country. And I think he's going to be awesome for Pat Kelsey and Louisville this year. And I think Xavier desperately needs... if Xavier had Richard Pitino and all the guys he brought in with Ryan Conwell on this roster, I think they're a tournament team. That's how good I think how impactful Ryan Conwell could have been for this team and for the Big East.
Nice. Going back to let's going back a little bit. You were talking about how you think Providence could probably surprise some teams. And you kind of mentioned in passing that you thought they were able to assemble a fairly competent or good front court. I mean, is there any concerns? I'm not sure. I don't know if Coach English would actually say this explicitly, but I mean, for example, as you said, Oswin, they'll rely on him. He's a true sophomore. He's 6'10". They don't really have much actual size beyond that, right? I mean, you have a bunch of forwards around 6'7", 6'8", some of whom are actually decent 3-point shooters. But, as Julian was saying, you got St. John's front court, you got UConn's front court and everything like that. How do you think they kind of match up? Is it kind of a contrasting styles that they're going to play to their strengths, or what is it then about their front court that appealed to you?
I just think, I know Julian just talked about, Conrad used the term grit and grind, but Julian talked about, how St. John's going to crash the boards, both offensively and defensively. There's going to be a lot of physicality in the Big East, like there always is. There's not, a whole bunch of size. Taris Reed is what, 6'9", Zuby is 6'9". Yes, those guys are very physical. Providence might get out physical a little bit, but in terms of pure size, I'm talking about, Villanova, same thing. They don't have much size. Xavier doesn't have much size. Georgetown, I think, has the most athleticism, but they don't have a ton of size. So I think in this conference, Providence could kind of get away with it a little bit. And again, with guys like Hargrove from Drexel and guys like Duncan Powell from Georgia Tech. Duncan Powell was awesome for Georgia Tech last year. We saw him do it in the ACC. So I don't see why he wouldn't be able to do it in the Big East. And again, they have 2 sophomores that you should expect a pretty substantial leap from. So I just think between those 4 guys, you need 2 of them to pan out and 1 of them to be okay.
Did you get are there any things that you got from coaches you talked to, press conferences you've watched that have influenced your decision? Any, positive, negative intel that you got during your process of interviewing some of these coaches in the Big East?
So right now, the only Big East coach I had the chance to interview for this was Greg McDermott. He was gracious enough to speak with me. Most of my followers and listeners due to my Philly ties, I do have a relationship with Villanova. I'm hoping Kevin Willard and I are able to do something in the next week or so. So for my Villanova write-up. But what really struck me, I suppose, was when I was watching Xavier's press conference with Pitino's, opening presser after he was hired. That guy, I know his dad's Rick Pitino, who's obviously coaching St. John's. That dude, he said, I think the question was, did your dad want you to come to Xavier? He said, look, I had so many job offers. My dad didn't want me to take any of them because what I had in New Mexico was great. He's like, but when the Big East came calling, that was the job my dad said, okay, yes, you should leave for. And I just think he is such a Big East style coach. I think he's going to do similar to what Shaka Smart has done with Marquette in terms of just player development, getting, the most, maximizing his talent. And more than Shaka Smart, he's going to be able to recruit. Shaka Smart is good at finding the Oso Iguodala's and developing them for 4 years.
Yeah.
He's good at finding Tyler Kolek. Tyler Kolek is, I think, the only transfer that he's ever really gotten from George Mason, and he did a phenomenal job developing him into an All-American. But I think Pitino is going to be able to do a little bit of both in terms of developing really well. And we know he could recruit freshmen as well because he found JT Toppin on the radar. He found Donovan Dent on the radar. Jamal Mashburn Jr., he played for him in Minnesota, then came to New Mexico with him. Jalen House. He's getting those guys to a Mountain West school. And a Mountain West school that wasn't that good before he got there. I just think I think the guy is going to eat, sleep, and breathe Big East. and I think it's going to work out very well in the long. His first year at New Mexico, he needed time. I think he's going to have the same gap year this year with Xavier. But I'm saying in the long term, I'd be very excited if I was an Xavier Musketeer fan.
Excellent. I think one final question, because again, like, conferences like the Big East, they tend to attract, like I said, whether it's like, 4-star recruits and everything like that, or, like the top transfers, in the portal. If you're basketball sickos like us, and you have Jonathan Gavoni on Noties, you'll notice, right, that every other day he'll talk about some international player, an international transfer, signing on with one of these schools. Is there any expectation, just real quick, like from, I know, like, for example, Providence has a pair of young men from Estonia. I think St. John's has a kid from Austria, I want to say. Just like, do you feel like do you think they're going to have like any like immediate impact, or do you think like these are more the guys that Gavoni is saying, like, they're kind of like the, high upside kind of dart throws. Let's see what happens,
I think if anyone's going to pop in terms of international guys in the Big East, it's going to be one of the Creighton guys. Mostly because Owen Freeman, again, we don't know when he's going to play. They got 2 big men. They got Kareem Conan and Alexa Dimitrish. Not even going to bother trying to finish that because I don't want to disrespect the guy. But with that said, like, when I spoke with Greg McDermott, he was raving about how big of a piece Fedor Zucic is going to be for them. And he didn't play much last year. He played in the Big East tournament when Steve Ashworth was in foul trouble, but he didn't. Everyone was expecting Fedor Zucic to potentially be a one-and-done draft prospect. And he barely played at Creighton.
He can shoot, man.
Yeah.
He can shoot.
He's going to make up. I know that's kind of not answering your question because Zucic was an international guy last year.
Yeah, but I mean, as you said, he wasn't getting like normal rotational minutes, but yeah.
But in terms of like the guy Ole Miss God or the guy UNC God, like those guys are going to be legit. That they're going to do similar to what Kasparis Yakachonis, in my opinion, did last year for Illinois. Even the guys Illinois has, same thing. I don't think those guys are going to have that type of impact.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to be fun development projects, just like Fedor Zucic has been for Creighton.
Terrific. All right. Any final thoughts on the Big East?
No. What I will say,
okay.
No. What I will say real quick, Villanova, we didn't talk much about, and obviously that's the team I have ties to in this conference. They're the reason I even got credentialed for the Big East tournaments. Bryce Lindsey is going to be the best player on that team. Like, I don't say particularly close because they do have, like, I think Willard, given how late he took the job, did a good job assembling the roster with who he was able to. But, like, I know John Rothstein tweeted out when he was at the Finn watching practice, a projected starting 5. Bryce Lindsey wasn't even in it. I was at the summer, I apologize, the name of it. They had an open practice. I think called it like Summer Jam. Bryce Lindsey, was the best player on that team. Him and one of the guys that came from Maryland with Willard, Tafara Gabari, the kid from New Zealand. He was a freshman last year in Maryland. He is athletic. He's versatile. I think he's going to be a huge surprise, Gabari, but I think Bryce Lindsey is going to be the best player on that Villanova team.
Nice. So shout out Devin Askew, though, man. He's gonna do stuff, man. He's gonna do stuff.
What is this? His 6-year college basketball?
I told you, veteran savvy goes a long way.
Oh my God.
In March. Hey, they give him those waivers. He chose to use them, man.
Yeah, that's gonna be a 6-year of college basketball.
Jesus Christ.
He's battle tested.
So
all right. Well, having said that, let's move over to the Patriot League, where our guy Julian Mendelsohn, that's right, has become, hasn't become, he's become even more of an expert and authority on the Patriot League. So I guess the floor is yours, Julian. I guess we'll start out with the same general question. I mean, what's the landscape, of the Patriot League looking like for this upcoming season?
I think the term I would use is rebuilding.
Fair.
And I'll say it because of this. So first stat I'm going to rattle off here. In the entire I know there's only 10 teams in the conference, but there are 10 returning players total across the conference who averaged double digits the year before. 10 total in the entire conference, right? Obviously Bucknell was fantastic last season. Had their hearts broken in the tournament. They lost Noah Williamson. They lost a bunch of other guys. American won the conference. They now have 6 freshmen this year. They lost just about everybody. It's really been kind of a war of attrition. Everyone thought, Colgate was the team to beat coming into the season. Obviously, that ended up not being the case. They had a bit of a down year. And so I think there's kind of a general feeling, while I know Colgate is still a threat in the conference, and when you win 5 in a row in the manner in which they did, they're going to always have the target on their back. But I don't think that it's just the Colgate show in this conference anymore. And I think the other teams have started to catch on to that. And there's a lot of new blood in the head coaching realm over there right now. It's very, very different from what it's been the last, 4 or 5 seasons, I think.
Julian, you spoke with Matt Langle this morning.
Yeah, I did.
Does he have any idea how difficult it is to win such a crapshoot conference like the Patriot League 5 years in a row to make the tournaments?
It's funny, when I talked with him, he was kind of mentioning that he's not results focused at all.
Yeah.
That he's very process focused, and he was even saying it was Coach B, but it was true. It really was just year at a time, game at a time. They weren't really focusing on anything other than building the culture. But I mean, your culture's been working out really well. When he said at one point, everyone who was on the team had won the Patriot League at some point.
Yeah. Which
is astounding, and I think, again, like I said, I think that's a kind of a double-edged sword in a conference like the Patriot, because one, it does mean that you know how to win, but two, it also means that pretty much every team in the conference, every single one of those years, and every year after, is looking at you as the team to beat every single year. And I know, Colgate got hit with a couple injuries last season. They're bringing a lot of guys back. Obviously, Jalen Cox is the big name that they're bringing back. But I think the big thing in the Patriot League this year that's going to be really interesting is a lot of these teams, for the most part, outside of a couple, don't really have an idea of what their front court looks like right now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So, Conrad, do you have a follow-up or to
No.
Colgate? So, my question then is, Julian, you've interviewed, let me see, almost over half, I will say, coaches in this conference. I'm pulling up now. You've interviewed 1, 2, 3, 7. Six. Sorry.
6. I thought it was 6. We had something lined up with one of the schools that fell through, but yeah, 6.
Okay. So 6 out of 10 teams in this conference, so over half.
Yeah.
Anyway, now that we've been doing math, what type of insight can you give us about the Patriot League this year after your conversation with those coaches?
It's going to be very wide open. One question that I asked every single coach when I did at the end of the interview was, who is your biggest competition? I got a general cluster of teams, I will say that. And a few teams appeared multiple times, but no coach pretty much gave me the exact same answers. I will say that the team that I think is going to be at the top of the conference is Navy. It seems that in the Patriot League right now, given that they have a bit of a different transfer structure, it's a lot harder to bring transfer players in. They don't do revenue sharing in the conference. It's a lot about who you can get to stay. And Navy got pretty much everybody to stay. They're the only team that is returning all 5 of their starters. Austin Benini is the big name that I think is pretty much the favorite for player of the year going into the season to make note of. Donovan Draper is another name that I've heard a lot about in terms of having an impact on that team. But just the continuity that they have right now at Navy, the only guy that's changed is the head coach. And, when I talked to him, I was given the opportunity to talk to him. Very amazing guy. Doesn't seem like much is going to change. For those of you who don't know, Navy's head coach Ed DeChellis retired. It wasn't like he was fired. And John Perry was an instrumental part of that team and that organization for the last 6-7 years anyway. So it's not like he's a new face. It's not like, he's coming in with a completely different philosophy. It seems like he's looking to emulate a lot of what DeChellis was doing and has the talent and the experience this year for what I think is a experienced team in a conference full of, when it comes to players, a lot of rookies.
Okay.
Nice. What then? Obviously, American and Bucknell, they basically they co-won the regular season. What are their chances of being able to kind of repeat at making a run, for that one bid in that in the Patriot League?
I've actually talked with both coaches, and it's really interesting. I think and it's interesting for different reasons. With Bucknell, I made this joke to Coach Griffin. They've got a Noah Williamson-shaped hole in the front court. Obviously, he left for Alabama in the offseason for a giant sum of money. But they're confident in the guys that they brought in to replace him. And then with American, it's interesting because when I talk to Coach Simpkins, their numbers and their play style don't really align, which sounds weird. But if you look at the KenPom, they're one of the slowest teams in the country. That being said, if you watch the games, that team is, and Coach Simpkins says this, they're 7 seconds or less team. And so it's going to be interesting to see because with Matt Rogers gone in American, he was kind of the one thing that was cementing down that slower pace. So American with 6 freshmen, a bunch of young guys, like maybe just running all over teams this year and shooting the cover off the ball. But it's going to look a lot different than it did last year. And Bucknell, it's going to depend on how they can operate through their front court and how some of their backcourt guys progress.
Shout out Mike Muscala.
I think both of these teams are going to be in the mix. And I think, honestly, there's probably 5 or 6 teams that I could see winning the league this year.
So going off of that, and for anybody watching, we have 262 of you right now. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. We will answer them, whether Big East or Patriot League related. Myself, Julian, and Conrad will answer them at the conclusion of the Patriot League, so feel free to comment. What about Lehigh? Because, Julian, I just know from conversations we've had while writing the magazine, is a team you seem to be higher on the consensus. Like, I know Blue Ribbon, for example, has Lehigh 8th out of 10 in this conference. I know you had a great conversation with Coach Reed. I know he sold you on Lehigh a little bit. I mean, what can we expect? Are they one of those 6 teams that you're alluding to that could win the conference? And what do you think about them?
They are one of those 6 teams that I think could win the conference. Here's the thing. Coach Reed has been there for a long time. For those of you who know who CJ McCollum is, Coach Reed coached CJ McCollum in college at Lehigh. He's the same coach. He's been there for 15 years. And, so he's got the experience. He's had seasons like this. And I think the last couple of years he's talked about it, injuries have been a big issue for them. They had a lot of issues in the front court this season when it came to defending the paint. And the big part of that was because they lost multiple centers throughout the season. Henry Ediasa went down. I can't recall the name of the other guy who went down off the top of my head, but that was a big issue for them. But what Coach Reed told me is that, in spite of that, it gave a lot of guys who were probably going to be fringe rotation players a lot of opportunity to play, and that has really spurred them along this year. The three guys that he really emphasized. He talked about Nasir Whitlock, their starting guard this season. He mentioned Alfredo Odessa, who's 6'10" Italian. He was a freshman last season. He's going to be a front court beast. And actually, the guy that he was highest on was Joshua Ingram, who's going to be kind of like a 3-and-D connective wing, who he says has made tremendous strides this year. And I know it was an elevator pitch and all that stuff, but he, it did not feel like one of those things where he's just, saying it to hype himself up, whatever. He's been doing this a while. He knows when, he knows when to believe, like, yeah, this team can actually be something this year. And I think, and I'm gonna stick with him. I think that this Lehigh team, if they stay healthy, will be in the mix for the conference this year.
Okay. I actually got a question. These are two teams typically aren't really in the factor. They're not really in the conversation of really, being a serious contender for the conference title. They're typically not in the conversations for postseason, play. But Army and Navy are interesting because the reason why I asked was the other day on Tuesday, Steve and I were talking with Kevin about the Mountain West, and he was just talking about like how Air Force is always like, we're talking about basketball, but it's an interesting situation because let's be real. Those guys aren't there necessarily to play basketball. That's not their first priority. So, I mean, from what you've kind of maybe talking to the coaches and just kind of like, studying their performance like this past season and how, they have a lot of consistency, bringing back a lot of, same players from last year. They both had winning records within the conference. I mean, they're definitely still making it tough for those guys who do have postseason aspirations. What can you tell us about those two teams and how they've kind of gone about, putting together as competitive a team as possible?
Well, I think they're in drastically different positions right now, if I'm going to be honest with you. Army lost just about everybody. Most notably, Josh Scovins is gone, transferred out. I think a big thing is they have a lot more of an extended roster in the Marine Corps and stuff like that. I didn't actually get an opportunity to ask Coach Perry about that. And I haven't gotten a chance to talk to the Army coach. It was a question I wish I would have asked. But I think it is interesting because you're right. Like, I'm pretty sure there's also, like, if I'm not wrong, aren't there like height requirements as well?
Right.
That they have to navigate, which in football is a little bit easier to do than it is in basketball. But, I think at the end of the day, it's about the values and the lessons. The interesting thing that I heard from Coach Perry when kind of talking about this kind of stuff was he was talking about, there's 3 categories that they have to win, and that's the foul battle, the turnover battle, and the rebounding battle, if I remember correctly. I may be wrong I may be misquoting him on that. I don't have the quote off the top of my head, but I know there's 3 categories, and turnovers was one of them.
Yeah. And
so I think there it's a matter of, inputting principles, right? Because when you're talking to Army, Navy, it's very structured, it's very principled, it's very like, you already know what the culture is. You don't have to do as much culture building as you do at another school, because the school in and of itself has this very like structured, strict, militaristic, because it's, a military academy culture. So it's about, implementing those values on the basketball court. And I think that's what makes those two teams different. They're going to be a lot more physical, right? Any game with Army and Navy is going to be a absolute, dogfight when it comes to, fighting for things on the glass and stuff like that. But like I said, I think they're in drastically different positions right now. Honestly, I have them 1-10 in the conference, if we're being honest. Army 10, Navy 1. So maybe one's doing a little better when it comes to figuring that out than the other is at this point.
Yeah.
Let me jump in on this because I had a very similar conversation with Andrew Wilson at VMI. VMI, another military academy, obviously. And VMI's basketball has been so bad for so long. Like, they've been just about the worst Division I team the past, 8 years? Up until last year, because I think Wilson's that good of a coach. Now this year, VMI has the second most continuity in the country behind Purdue. who could be the preseason number 1 team. If not preseason 1, then top 3 at worst. He was telling me how Ricky Bradley, who is the only returning SoCon guy on the All-SoCon team last year, returning to the conference, how he got Ricky Bradley especially, but the entire team to buy in. They're in the barracks at 6 a.m., just in uniform, going through basic training, doing all that. They don't get special privileges because they're athletes on the team, because they're basketball players. They're up at, as you said, 6 a.m., doing basic training in the barracks. Like, these guys get structure. And some guys buy into it. And the guys that buy into it, like Ricky Bradley again, that's the reason he is the only returning guy on the All-SoCon team, because he bought into what Andrew Wilson and what VMI is selling. So I just wanted to say that to reiterate Julian's point in terms of what these military academies are like. Julian, maybe you should have a conversation with Ethan Roberts. We'll talk about that afterwards. He was Patriot League freshman of the year when he was at Army. Obviously, now he might be the Ivy League preseason player of the year.
Right, I forgot he played at Army.
Yeah, I just to get his perspective on what playing at a military academy is like. Maybe that'd be good perspective for the magazine.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. So okay, I'll set that up. But anyway, we're 56 minutes in. We have over 300 of you watching. All 300 of you should go. 302 of you to be exact should go buy the magazine. $12 each. I know at least 250 of you have $12 in your bank account right now. I was going to say you did it backwards. There you go.
I don't know, man. I can't tell. It's weird.
Okay. Conrad, do you have any follow-ups? I'm just going to give a couple more minutes for any questions if anybody wants to comment or chime in.
No. I think Julian was pretty comprehensive here. I guess just one final thing. I mean, we talked about it a little bit with how Army, Navy, yeah, they're in their own very specific situation. But for the rest of the conference, did any of the coaches kind of talk about like how they kind of have to go about recruiting, whether that be recruiting from high school players or transfers? Just kind of again giving all the moving parts that which is right collegiate basketball, these days in 2025.
Well, it was interesting. They went about it in different ways. I will say that, my first conversation, the coach was big on like looking for guys that were high major-ish guys that, because of all the NIL stuff and guys coming back so frequently realized they weren't going to get playing time, and basically said, hey, you'll get playing time here, right? Some of these coaches have gone international. We've seen a couple of. There's 2, as far as I know off the top of my head, between Amondoris and Emmett Adair, guys who played for the U19 teams for their respective countries as well. So they're going abroad a little bit. But I think it is a little bit different recruiting for a low major conference, especially one that is as academically rigorous as the American is. Sorry, not the American. Yeah. The Patriot League is. I was thinking of Team American. But, a lot of the selling point is a lot more on, hey, you're going to play here and you're going to get a degree. And I think that's what kind of is the idea of getting guys to stick. A couple of coaches told me that was their strategy with some of these guys. But I think in a conference like this where, that there's going to be a lot of attrition, it's about finding guys that, 1, are good enough to play for your team, and 2, are going to be willing to stay.
Terrific.
One of you bought the magazine, so out of the 310 of you, I appreciate it.
I have a question in chat, Steven.
Okay.
How do you transfer
out of? Are you asking, like, physically, or like? The
school, or the Army in general? I think that's 2 very different questions.
I was gonna say, in terms of logistics of like having your eligibility, that's actually one I do not know the answer to, because I do know some guys do struggle. That's a question Julian will have to find out from Ethan. How difficult it is to transfer out. Like you can't just transfer from the Army and go anywhere. Like even academically, the credits I've heard don't totally transfer over.
I mean, it's tough because you've made a commitment to sign up for a military academy, regardless of whether or not that was to play basketball or not. So I think that kind of makes it different. I remember David Robinson back in the day. Did he do his service? I think he did his service and then came back and played.
Yeah.
After that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I wonder what he would have been like in NIL. But as far as like how you transfer out of the school, I'm assuming it's much tougher. I haven't actually, I know there were a couple of guys on. I mean, there are about 10 to 15 guys on Army's roster that transferred, so it may not be as difficult as we like to think. But I definitely don't think it's quite as simple as it is at like Lehigh or Creighton or something like that.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, this concludes this live stream. Again, unless we get a last minute question come in, of this on the Center Hub's YouTube channel and Twitter page. We appreciate all 319 of you for tuning in with us. Go buy the magazine. Can't emphasize it enough. It'll be out October 13th, which is Columbus Day. Link is in the YouTube bio. Link is on our pinned tweet on the Center Hub's Twitter page at the Center Hub _BB. You're watching this on the Center Hub's Twitter page most likely. So go check that out. Again, $12. We have 14 of the best college basketball journalists are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. Can't emphasize enough, like, this is going to be the gold standard of college basketball. First year publication, go support it. It'll be well worth the $12. Get it now, watch only $12 because it's worth much more than that.
We'll even autograph it for you.
I will personally fly to your house. I will sign the PDF for you.
Hand deliver.
I will e-sign your PDFs.
That's right. E-signature.
But okay.
And if you're just tuning in now, you tuned in late, we encourage you, just watch the replay, of this episode. And if you have questions still, just put it in the comments and one of us or all of us will get back to you,
Yeah. Again, Big East, Patriot, Sonny Ray. I want to pay a Steven Auto. Yeah, he does.
See?
Yes, Sonny.
So, okay. Myself, Conrad, Julian, we will talk to you guys next episode. You can follow me on Twitter at @the_NBAGEL. It's NBAGELL. If you tuned into this for the Big East, I will be at Big East Media Day, October 21st, giving you coverage of everything that transpires at Big East Media Day and MSG that day. Julian, you can follow him at 12J Mendel.
Yep.
There you go. And you can follow Conrad at CP3_777. You can see that right there now. And yeah, go check out our work at the-center-hub.com. We are undergoing a website platform change. So we will be posting more content on the website very, very soon. But again, $12. Go get the magazine. We will talk to you guys next episode. Thanks for listening.